Revelstoke, British Columbia, we are deeply grateful to live, work, and learn on the unceded traditional territories of the Sinixt, the Ktunaxa, and the Secwepemc peoples. We recognize their enduring relationship to this land, their histories, and their ongoing stewardship that continues to sustain us. Thank you. And now, with that gratitude in our hearts, it's a true pleasure to welcome you to this special event hosted by Kaizen Wellness Center. We're so glad that you've joined us this evening for what promises to be a fascinating and inspiring presentation. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Nicholas Dogris, a highly accomplished psychologist, neuroscientist, and neurotechnology innovator with over 25 years of experience in EEG-based neurotherapy. Dr. Dogris is the CEO and co-founder of Neurofield, a pioneering company that develops advanced neurostimulation and neuromodulation technologies used by clinicians all around the world. He also serves as the director of the Neurorehabilitation Department at FHE Health in Florida and operates a private clinic in Santa Barbara, California, alongside his lovely wife, Dr. Tiff Thompson, where they integrate cutting-edge neurotherapy techniques into their clinical practice. Board certified in neurofeedback and a diploma in quantitative EEG, Dr. Dogris brings deep expertise in brainwave analysis and neuromodulation. His career began in the 1990s when he trained under Margaret Ayers, one of the pioneers of neurofeedback. Over the decades, he has contributed significantly to advancing brain-based therapeutic interventions and developing tools that help clinicians better understand and support brain function. In 2007, Dr. Dogris co-founded Neurofield with engineer Brad Witala, launching a new era in neurostimulation technology. Together, they created the first EEG synchronized pulsed electromagnetic field system using real-time Z-score feedback, a groundbreaking innovation in neuromodulation. Since then, their work has expanded to include synchronized transcranial current stimulation, alternating current stimulation, random noise stimulation, and advanced pink noise stimulation, all seamlessly integrated into Neurofield 64's innovative software platform. Dr. Dogris's research has been published in several peer-reviewed journals, including the Journal of Neurotherapy. His 2011 article, Neurofield, 3 Case Studies, and his 2012 study on the effect of Neurofield pulsed EMF on Parkinson's disease symptoms and QEEG both underscore the clinical relevance and scientific rigor of his work in neuromodulation. Earlier in his career, he conducted research exploring subliminal visual stimuli and EEG brain imaging and ADHD, contributing to valuable insights to the field of cognitive neuroscience. Currently, Dr. Dogris is leading 2 forthcoming studies slated for publication in 2026, which investigate the efficacy of multimodal neurostimulation techniques, continuing his commitment to advancing evidence-based approaches in neurotherapy and brain health. Through his work, Dr. Dogris has helped bridge the gap between neuroscience, psychology, and technology, empowering clinicians to enhance cognitive function, regulate brain activity, and improve mental health outcomes. His influence continues to shape the fields of neurofeedback and neuromodulation around the world. We are incredibly fortunate to have him with us this evening. That might actually make me cry, sorry. Yeah. To help our community here in Revelstoke and in Kelowna better understand the science and promise behind those innovative technologies. So before we begin, there are just a few housekeeping notes. To ensure a high quality recording, all attendees will remain muted during the presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please locate the chat box or the Q&A tab in your Zoom toolbar and take a moment to find that now. There will be a short Q&A session at the end for questions relating only to tonight's presentation. If you have other questions, including those about Kaizen Wellness Center's programs and how we utilize Dr. Dogris' systems here, please email us at revelstoke.info@kaizenwellnesscenter.com. If you're in Kelowna, we do have a practice in Kelowna, but we are going to ask you to still email revelstokeinfo@kaizenwellnesscenter.com. We'll field those questions from the Revelstoke office. As with all technology, there may be a few hiccups. If you lose sound or video, it's possible it is on your end unless we have notified you otherwise. Please do make sure to check your settings. And finally, a recording of tonight's presentation will be emailed to all of the attendees next week. So once again, thank you so much for being here, for your curiosity, for your presence, and your support of wellness and innovation in our community. And now it is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Nicholas Dogris.
Thank you very much. Oh my, what an honor. I'm so happy to be here and grateful to be able to talk to all of you tonight. And I'm certainly open to receiving any questions that you have. So let's just jump right in, shall we? I'm going to take you through a little journey and a little bit of a trip into how I actually ended up here. And then assuming that some of you know about neurostimulation, some of you don't, I'm going to take you from the the beginning. When I first started in this field, it's actually now, it's kind of scary to say out loud, but it's 35 years. And it's been a blessing to do everything that I've been able to do. I originally, when I went to college, I went to college to become a NASA astronaut. I wanted to go to space and I wanted to study neuroscience in space. So I attended Humboldt State University, and I was under the tutelage of Dr. Jim Knight and Dr. John Morgan. And both of them were neuroscientists, and they were the ones that introduced me to the world of EEG. And I went into it headlong. I was a natural in that field because I'm a musician, and the brain is very much like a musical instrument. When I saw waveforms on the board for the first time, I said, "Well, we know that's a bass note." And my teacher said, "No, my goodness." He goes, "How'd you know that?" And I said, "Well, look at it. It's a slow wave, blah blah blah." And he went, "Yeah, you're gonna be my student." And I ended up working for him and publishing a paper and wrote an algorithm back at that time. It was 1988, that tracked the actual physical numbers from 0 to 9 and could actually organize them. It was a fuzzy logic machine learning algorithm. And from there, I realized that I wanted to be in neuroscience, but when I tried to join NASA, they wanted me in the military, and I didn't want to be in the military, so that was a course change. And so that's when I met Margaret Ayers, who is, she'll go down in history as the mother of neurotherapy. A beautiful lady that had a practice in Beverly Hills, and I worked for her for 2 years. And I learned a lot about EEG. I learned a lot about morphology, being able to read the EEG and understand it from a different perspective. She was a brilliant lady, and she mentored me very well. Um, as time went on, I would end up opening my own practice and doing EEG all through the 90s and working in psychiatric hospitals. And it was a first responder for a while, negotiator for the Orange County Mental Health Department. It's crazy times. And then in 2002, I was full-blown neurofeedback practitioner, and then the world happened to me, and I got pushed off of my little neurofeedback platform because my son was born premature, 3 months early, and he was intubated at birth. And this is still hard to see, my first meeting with him. I knew at that time that what I knew how to do wasn't going to be enough. So that's when I started working on the Neurofield system. It was 2002. And I developed a pulse electromagnetic stimulator that I could use on a baby. And it worked. And my son is going to graduate He's going to graduate from college this December. Well, I didn't think it was going to hit me that hard. Whew, excuse me. He's going to graduate and from the same school that I graduated from. And and he's a beautiful human being. But he was the reason all this started. And I had no intention of opening a company or doing any of the stuff that I'm doing now. But I did it because my mentor said you had an ethical obligation to move forward and you needed to share it with the world. So here we are. So what is Neurofield? Neurofield is it's a treatment system that has been in development now for about 20 years. And what we use is a lot of different kinds of energy to be able to stabilize the brain. Now, when we talk about energy, it gets into the hokey kind of fields, and this is not anything like that. This is measurable, this is identifiable, and it's quantifiable. Everything that we do is based in science. Everything that we do is something that can be replicated. And I have two world-class engineers that have been working with me that actually worked in the U.S. military. One of them was U.S. military, one was in the Turkish military. Both of them were weapons electronic designers. And one of them designed the radar Doppler tracking system for the Harm Seeker missile. And the other one designed the turret system, the missile defense turret system for naval ships. Both of them are amazing engineers, and somehow or another, destiny pushed us all together, and we all made this amazing system that was designed to track the brain and to be able to target specific areas of the brain in order to help it regulate, in order to help it to find balance. So the first thing I developed was a EMF stimulator. It was a tiny little device, and it generated an intensity of EMF that was actually less than what you will get if you put your head in the refrigerator looking for food. Okay, it's very, very tiny. But what we discovered was that with EMF, you could actually increase blood flow, and to such a degree that it would not be dangerous, but it would cause just a very gentle neurostimulation that would actually trigger the neurons to call for resources. And we measured this, and we could actually see blood flow increases. And as a result of blood flow increasing, inflammation would drop. And this was some of the first things that we started to notice. But by simply helping the brain to get more resources, it did what it does best. It's the best doctor in the room. It uses those resources, it engages in neurogenesis, it repairs, it builds more cells, it adds them to the existing cellular networks, and then it rehabilitates itself, it reorganizes itself. It's an amazing process. As we started to look at this, we realized that EMF could be used in a number of different ways for pain reduction. We saw it in bone healing and orthopedics. It actually could heal bones about 50% faster. And we have studies showing that that was the case. We saw nerve pain reduction in people that had suffered from different kinds of injuries, and nerve pain reduction could happen within 24 hours, all because of being able to reduce inflammation. And it all went back to blood flow. So it was the beginning of the system. So one of the arms of the EMF of the Neurofield system is a EMF stimulator. The next part was a transcranial direct current stimulator. Now we have a device that we call the Genesis. The Genesis is probably one of the most advanced neurostimulators that has ever been built. It is capable of being able to generate a direct current stimulation, an alternating current stimulation, three different kinds of random noise, and then what's called a biphasic stimulation. The whole system is integrated together so you can control devices and deliver these stimulations simultaneously. And you can program them to be given in such a way where one of the units does one thing, another does another thing, and they can work in a synchronized tandem. And this is kind of the secret sauce with with the neurofield system. While you stimulate and increase blood flow with EMF, you can entrain or disrupt, depending on what you wanted to do, with cranial stimulation. TDCS is one of the oldest forms of stimulation. It was used back in long time ago, decades ago. For the first uses, it was used for ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. And there's the original ECT device on the far left there. It had the bilateral stimulation to each of the temples, delivering a very short pulse of 800 milliamps of stimulation. And it had one intended use, and that was to elicit a seizure. And the idea was that it was going to help reset the brain, which is kind of brutal, but it's still used today in hospital. Of course, there's anesthetic given, and it's unilateral, and it's used for treatment-resistant depression. Now, what we discovered was that DC was just one of many different kinds of stimulations that we could program in the system, and these are examples of what we do: sine waves, triangle waves, um, pulsed stimulations, and then, of course, noise. Now, with DC stimulation, the mechanism of action is based on the anode and the cathode. Now, think battery. Anode is the positive, cathode is the negative. And so what you're doing is the anodal stimulation on a cell has an excitatory quality to it. So it makes the cell more likely to fire. Cathodal, or the negative, has an inhibitory effect on the cell and makes it least likely to fire. So it's really simple. You put the anode where you want the brain to basically be more active, and the cathode where you'd like to decrease activity. Now, MRI science has discovered that TDCS increases blood flow. Wherever you place that anode and cathode and you measure, you will see significantly increased levels of blood flow between the two electrodes. Now, this is wonderful because at a low level, at basically 2 milliamps, you can stimulate the brain very safely, increase blood flow, and if there's damage in those regions, the damaged cells fall into the vascular system, become free radicals, and then exit the body. So it's a way of reducing inflammation in the brain. It clears out the areas that have damage so that the brain can engage in what it does best, which is, again, neurogenesis, adding new cells to the system and then reincorporating to existing neural networks. Now, when we get deeper into this kind of stimulation technology and we look at what it really does, it gets pretty complicated. I'm not going to go into all of this stuff, but the green lightning bolt is the anode and the red one is the cathode. So wherever you put that anode, you're going to have a reduction of glutamate, right? The brain's going to just start drinking up that glutamate. And then as that stimulation goes deeper into the brain and it hits the glia are rich in calcium and sodium ions. And what happens is that they begin to surge. And the glia are the glue between the limbic system and the cortex. And they're responsible for the connectivity between those systems. And when they start to surge, they go into an accelerated form of neuroplasticity, allowing the brain to start to quickly rewire itself. So when we found this information, it was verified through MRI studies. We got really excited about that because what we knew already was that we could stimulate the brain and help it to recover. But now we realize that we could stimulate the brain, put it in a state of accelerated neuroplasticity, and then drive it and then train it so that it could actually improve much faster. Basically, what we did was we created a form of physical therapy for the brain. We just had to put it in the correct state in order to do it. But the biggest question we had was, is it safe? Can you do this and know that you're doing it beyond a shadow of a doubt? There's no room for error here. So in a bunch of different places around the world, a number of safety studies were run. And in this 2016 safety study, these researchers from little places like Harvard and Stanford and Yale got together, and they had over 33,200 sessions of TDCS with over 1,000 subjects. And there was not a single report of serious adverse effect. What does that mean? Serious adverse effect, defined by the FDA, is an event that occurs that is harmful to the person and is irreversible. You don't heal from it. You don't come back from it. There wasn't a single event like that. Now, that's saying something for this type of energy because it has been shown in the literature to be very effective for treating different kinds of disorders. And there isn't medications or different kinds of treatments that can make the same kind of claim. Serious, no serious adverse effects. That was the first study. Then there's a meta-analysis that came out a year later, basically. And this meta-analysis took in consideration 158 studies with over 4,130 people in them. And they also replicated the same finding, no significant adverse events. Now, can adverse events happen? Yes. There can be redness of the skin, there can be a blister, there can be the feeling of a headache, there can be moodiness, there can be fatigue. Those are the only adverse effects, and they are short-lived. Typically, they last for about a day or two at the most. So we know that the technology is safe. When you look at meta-analysis for direct current stimulation for the treatment of depression, it was found to be equivalent to that of RTMS and antidepressant drug use in primary care. So we know that DC stimulation at low intensity is easy to deliver. It's mobile. It's something that people can obtain very easily, and it has effective responses that are equivalent, if not better, than TDCS and medication combined. So as the research went deeper, we found that there was direct current stimulation, and actually the accelerated response in the glia would cause the large network structures to begin to engage in homeostasis. In other words, the power levels in these hub systems begin to balance, which is really interesting. So all we had to do was launch the brain in a state where it had the ability to communicate and reestablish functional connectivity between these systems, and then it could actually balance itself. And this is what I've been telling my students for decades, which is the brain is the best doctor in the room. If we use a really tiny level of energy administered correctly, it would take over the job and do it itself. And this is what one of this study actually shows. It's also been shown to be very effective with the aging brain. And I'm going to come back to this with another study because we've advanced this technology considerably. But this is one of the first studies that was a meta-analysis showing that you could help people that experience cognitive decline to improve using TDCS. I like to play with those little transitions on the screen. They're fun. I always get teased for doing so. Anyway, the next thing that was established through the literature was for the treatment of stroke. People that lost or had limited use of limbs after a stroke, it's been found that you could put TDCS over the motor cortex, stimulate that region while simultaneously having a person do physical therapy, a real physical therapist working on the limb at the same time. And so we ran trials and we looked at that. And I have a picture of a guy that had a stroke. He lost the use of his arm. And we did 5 days of stimulation. And by the 5th day, he was high-fiving the physical therapist. And we have a picture of that. And what was really remarkable was that he was convinced that he was just as strong as he had been prior to a stroke. So we put him on a weight bench and he lifted weights and was able to lift weights with that arm after we got it functional again. And it was strong. The only thing that he had an issue was with the temperature. He said the arm felt colder to him for some reason, which is really interesting. And we actually measured that too, and it was the same temperature. So his perception of it was off. Okay, so at the end of the day, we know that DC stimulation is able to increase cortical excitability. It can actually increase GABA at the cathode. It increases blood flow, and it is safe to administer. Alternating current. Now, this is DC doesn't have a frequency. You're just streaming electrons from an anode to a cathode. In alternating current, you're actually creating a frequency. And so the amount of times that you cross the zero barrier in polarity from positive to negative per second will define a frequency. And what you can do with that is you can drive the brain at different speeds. So if you use DC for a period of time and you put the brain into this flexible plastic state, then you can introduce AC stimulation and drive it. Very similar to like you getting on a treadmill and me setting it at a specific speed and starting it. And then you run at that speed. So you can entrain the brain to actually rehabilitate and get back to its previous resting states. And when people get injured, what happens is that the brain slows down. And so we can target those states through EEG mapping and quantification of the EEG. Our system also generates what's called random noise. We do several different kinds of it, and I'm not going to go too deep into this. But random noise is a way of decoupling the brain. You can generate pink noise, brown noise, and white noise. Pink noise is what the brain does when you're awake. Brown noise is what it does when you sleep. And it has the ability to help to stabilize the background rhythm in the brain. We also generated a vagal nerve stimulator. The vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. It's the largest cranial nerve in the human body, and it goes through all the organs. If there's a really good book written by Stephen Porges called Polyvagal Theory, if you really want to get into it. Dr. Porges has spent his entire career, 30 years, writing about polyvagal. And what he identified was called dorsal freeze. And it usually is seen in people that suffer from PTSD and depression. Vagal stimulators were originally released or approved by the FDA for the treatment of seizure and epilepsy and treatment-resistant epilepsy. And so when we learned about this, we said, well, we can deliver this without having to implant a electrode in a person. You could actually hit the branch of the vagus nerve through the ear. And so now uses of vagal nerve stimulation are being used for depression, cluster headaches, and epilepsy management, but also anxiety and PTSD. It's really interesting. Newer studies now are also talking about neuroinflammation and how by stimulating the 10th cranial nerve, you can help reduce inflammation in the body itself and not just the brain. And again, polyvagal theory is a way to go. We designed a VNS system using what's called a 15 kilohertz square wave. It's a really cool little invention. Basically, it's pulsing DC really fast. And so this thing is a disruptor, and it prevents other types of rhythms from propagating. Very much like a seizure kindling that can occur in the brain that can give rise to a full-blown seizure. When a biphasic stimulation is introduced, it will actually break it up and prevent it from happening. And it's really simple to give. You simply attach it to the vagus nerve, and then off you go. The last kind of stimulation we use is photobiomodulation. This, again, is a whole nother lecture. It goes into the use of light, which is incredibly fascinating for tissue repair, neuromodulation, cellular stimulation, inflammation reduction. We create different kinds of different wavelengths of light actually penetrate the dermis, the epidermis, the skull, and go about 30 millimeters into the cortex. It has the ability to increase nitric oxide in the molecule, and that will give rise to increased blood flow. It also infuses the mitochondria in such a way where the mitochondria actually kick out more ATP. So using pure light, you can help the brain to reduce inflammation and to increase the amount of energy that it has. Now, believe it or not, we run all of these things at the same time. Pulse electromagnetic, cranial electric, and photobiomodulation, and vagus nerve stim all simultaneously, which is pretty fascinating. We use red light the majority of the time, and then near infrared as well. Our system uses a 810 nanometer stimulator along with a 1070 nanometer, both of which have a pretty deep penetration into the cortex. Okay, so that's one of those little pesky presentations. Now we're going to talk about some clinical stuff. So, as Jennifer indicated, I am the director of a facility. It's a hospital in Florida, 185 beds inpatient, 250 outpatient. Primarily, we deal with substance abuse issues, opioid dependence, benzodiazepine, alcohol, stimulants, but we also have a very large mental health component as well. So we get everything coming through the door there. Um, when I was first asked to work at that facility and asked to introduce neuro, we went through a number of clinical stages to, number one, make sure it was safe to give to people while they went through detox. Number two, to establish clinical efficacy. Does it actually do what we think it's doing? And then number three, is it safe? Can you actually do this and make sure that it works over time? So we ran a number of studies. I am 8 years deep into this research now. We have over 5,000 EEGs from people that have gone through this program. And we found a biomarker in the opioid group let me see if I can show this as a slide, current slide. This is kind of cool. We found this biomarker in the opioid group where there's a whole bunch of active beta in the front of the brain, and when they come into the hospital, and when we gave them neurostimulation over a short period of time, within 7 to 14 days, we could actually reduce the amount of this frontal beta. Now, this puts a person in real sympathetic activation when they're coming off of opioids and they can't relax, they're dope sick, and they have insomnia, they'll have anxiety, they'll have depression, they'll be agitated, all sorts of different things. And so a lot of the times they leave AMA. They want to get their drug of choice and they want to feel better pretty quick. We were able to design a protocol that would actually reduce the craving within the first 7 days as they were stepped down on a detox schedule. And we monitored and showed this through groups of. We started with a group of, I think, 50, and then we ended up with a group of 450 participants. So it was quite a large study group. And when you get group effects like this in the EEG, you found something real. Typically, the EEG can change thousands of different ways because there's so many neurons. 85 billion of those neurons floating around in your head, with over 100 trillion synaptic and dendritic connections, creating roughly 7 quadrillion events per second. That's an amazing computational powerhouse that we carry around. So when you actually can track a change like this in the EEG, you found something real. So we found that not only did we reduce the beta in the frontal lobe, but their sleep ratings improved by the 5th day they were sleeping through the night. Depression dropped. We gave them the PHQ-9, and we looked at the group and we wanted to see, by the 3rd day, they were reporting subclinical symptoms of depression. And by the 2nd day, they were reporting subclinical results of anxiety. And by day 15, it was hardly existent. So at first I thought, wow, I mean, we're testing a group and can we replicate this? So we did. And we ran it again with controls, and controls had everything that the facility offered except for neuro. And they did have a treatment effect that brought them below the cutoff of 10. That's anything below 10 is subclinical. But when you added neuro in, you see the following results in these groups, which is significantly lower levels of anxiety here. And when we looked at the depression versus controls, again, we saw a significant reduction in symptoms of depression. Now, what was really amazing was that the facility got audited by Blue Cross. And they came in and, like a typical insurance company, they want to decline treatment. They want to decline, and they want to say, like, well, we paid for this, but now you have to pay us back. All right. So we did a big evaluation with them, and it turned out that we established medical necessity on many, many cases that they had already declined. And so they ended up owing the facility something in the tune of almost $2 million by the time we were done with the audit. What I learned through this audit was really something very significant. They tracked these people for 1 year. It was 1,000 people. And in 1 year, the recidivism rate of those 1,000 people was 3.9%. 3.9%. Now, I worked hospital. I worked in inpatient psychiatric hospital during the 90s for 7 years. And during that time, the recidivism rate, I actually ran the recidivism study for that hospital. It was 33%. Now, it is pretty much the same level now in terms of, and when you look at recidivism in psychiatric facilities. Now, to see this was nothing, I mean, short of astonishing. I didn't believe it. As a matter of fact, a number of expletives came out of my mouth when the person reported this. So we've had some very interesting longer term length of stays. When I first started there, the length of stay was roughly around 15 days, and now we're averaging about 42 days. So what that means is they come into treatment and they stay in treatment longer and they get more out of treatment. They start to be able to learn better because their brain is working better. And this has been the kind of the missing link. And we make jokes about this at the facility all the time. It's like, wow, we're just trying to help these people to learn and understand and stabilize them, but they weren't able to deepen what they were receiving. And by being able to help to tend to the mind, we were able to get them into a place where we started to see the numbers change dramatically. And there's no denying them now. 8 years later, we are still at the same level of recidivism. So we have a program there called Shatterproof, and this is all first responders. And one of the things I started to see there was this profile of the heart. The yellow bar is the LF band in the heart, and it represents sympathetic activation. The HF band is the green bar, and that's parasympathetic. Now, those two in a resting state should be equivalent to each other. So we ran a study with first responders, and I'm going to quickly go through this, where we gave vagal stimulation, and we gave the 15 kilohertz square wave through the ear. We measured depression, insomnia, opioids, and look what happens. The LF and HF start to balance. But most notably, heart rate variability in these groups almost doubled. Normal heart rate variability is 50 milliseconds. And when we measured this group, these are group numbers, it was 25 milliseconds. That's low for heart rate variability. And when we actually went to, let's see, this is when they closed their eyes, the variability went up again, which is pretty astonishing. And of course, the pre-post with vagus nerve stimulation, PHQ scores went from 17.4 to 3.2. This is a 33 groups, 33 people, first responders. 14.7 for the GAD, down to 3.4. And then we saw this kind of balance. In psychotherapy, the therapists are coming out and say, wow, this guy is not on edge. You know, these guys are trained to be vigilant. They're trained to be ready to go to bat at any given time. That's what they're supposed to do. And they get stuck in there because they get traumatized. And a lot of these guys were lifers. They have been doing, you know, first responder work for 20, 30 years. And so they have sustained significant impact as a result of it. So now we're currently looking at multimodal neurostimulation. We give the whole kitchen sink at one time now. We've been able to establish safety over the last 15 years, and now we know that if we combine these modalities, we can increase blood flow, engage in entrainment all at the same time, and we can cut cravings, we can reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. So because of all of this, I have submitted the Genesis to the FDA, and we are seeking clearance for anxiety and insomnia now. It will be cleared by Christmas. Okay, so this is table 155. This is the opioid stimulation to cut cravings, and it did help to reduce the amount of high beta. And this is what you see in these these brain maps. And I'm not going to go too much into it because I know I'm getting close to the end of the hour and I want to give time for some questions. Now we're looking at what's called ERP studies, or event related potentials. And what we're doing is we're looking at how the brain actually responds over a period of time, and does it become more consistent. And these studies show increased consistency and an increase of the amplitude of the P300 wave. So in event-related potentials, it's a test where you click on a go stimulus and you ignore a no-go stimulus. And the P300 represents a waveform that occurs roughly 300 milliseconds after the presentation of a stimulus, and it represents a cognition. And so we can actually improve the amplitude of that response, which means that the activation of the frontal lobe improves significantly. And again, when we look at these tables, we were able to show the reduction down to in 8.4 second sessions, down to a subclinical dose for 155. And then table 160, which is our antidepressant um, um, uh, protocol, also had similar effects, improved the firing capabilities of the brain. It helped to reduce high beta in the brain, and it also increased the P2 and the P300 responses in these groups. Reduced symptoms of anxiety and depression by 14 sessions. It's down below 4 points. So when we follow up with these people, they maintain the treatment after 12 weeks of follow-up. They still report the same score after we establish this. So now we got to publish all this, and that's on the launch pad right now, and we're putting it out there so people can see what we're capable of being able to do, and there's more things in the horizon. Huh, that was a lot of wind that came out of me, I tell you. I want to give the audience a moment to be able to ask any questions.
Thank you, Nick. That was, as always, so, well, first I wanted to say congratulations to your son.
Thank you.
Yeah, start with the
Uh,
important things first. And then I
yeah,
thank you. I'm always enraptured and just enthralled with the information that you have to share. So thank you so much for that.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's look and see here. Do we have any questions?
Oh, I throw. There's a hand, Jocelyn.
Please.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, I just lost my screen when I pressed button. Hi, thank you. That was awesome. Really interesting. Thanks. I'll try to phrase my question as it kind of bubbles out, but your research talked about a whole bunch of different, groups that fit into a group. And then I'm wondering, because Jennifer, is this what you're using in your clinic and practice here? And so I'm wondering for the people in our town, is it customized to them, or is it a protocol that is run similar to a bunch of people? And I'm kind of coming from the concussion world with some of my
Oh
questions here.
yeah, yeah. So I didn't even touch on that. There's so many different places I could go with this, but we developed an AI system over the last year. It has a repository of 3,000 people. And the method that we teach and we use, and what we've taught Jennifer to use, is everybody that comes in, we measure the organ that we're going to treat. So we do a full EEG evaluation of the person. We measure their eyes open, their eyes closed, and we administer an ERP test. Now, this information is used and can be you could identify people that have had a concussion or a TBI. And we treat people with TBIs all the time. First responders have TBIs. They get blown up, beat up. Um, yeah, it's something that can be used to identify TBI. And in neurology, the P300, if it's attenuated, is actually the gold standard for identifying a TBI. But we've gone way beyond that. Our classifier and our AI classifier actually uses 49 different metrics and matches your data against these 49 metrics, and then we'll have a weight, and it can tell you how much of a match you are to the TBI population. But we don't stop there. We have classifiers for mood disorders, anxiety, depression, ADHD, autism, neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and frontotemporal dementia. Um, yeah, there's a number of different classifiers that we could use. But every person that gets measured it's individualized. We don't try to make people fit into a certain place. There's in the Neurofield system, there are several hundred different protocols. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can create treatment protocols for people. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, at a simple level.
Sure. So the answer is yes. We customize the treatment and we create what you need, and it's not what it's not canned, in other words.
Great.
Mhm.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Some of our listeners today are coming to us with children who are on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum.
Hmm.
And there may be some interest in how this technology can help.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as you know, like I started with my son, he suffered from a hypoxic injury, and when he was young, he looked very spectrumy. For sure. But what he really had was a brain injury, and so as I rehabilitated him, he started to look less spectrumy as he grew older, and as his brain recovered. But I've treated many children, and the technology has been used for many children with all sorts of neurodevelopmental issues, autism, ADHD, early life injuries, that kind of thing. Um, Typically, what we see is with autism, it helps the child to become, they kind of know where they end and others begin. That's one of the first things that starts to happen. We've helped children to reestablish speech. So that also works in conjunction with ABA type of therapies, or the spellers, that kind of stuff. We've worked with kids with ADHD and helped to improve their attention span. And there's 6 different profiles that we can look for in the data and then they're all different kinds of approaches for dealing with children that have this kind of issue. So it's another way of helping kids like that to focus and concentrate better. So yeah, for neuro, and it's great because um, this is the kind of treatment that when we get kids to come in, you would think that they don't want to go into the doctor's office and get a neurostimulation treatment, but they love to come in because they get to watch a cartoon, they hang out in the chair, we put all the stuff on them, and then they receive the stimulation, and it's very safe. Children tolerate it very well. We use ramping techniques to be able to get them up to a level where the stimulation is going to help to rehabilitate the brain and get it to function better. If I had to use one word, I would say that what we establish is better functionality with children.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We see like a lot of regulation improvement as well.
Yeah. 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 Kids on the spectrum can be very sensitive to light and sound.
Mhm.
And so when they go into a room and they get overwhelmed, they'll engage in self-stimulatory behavior to try to cut off that sudden stream of overstimulation, if you will. And so it really does help to bring down that sensitivity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh,
Does,
Melissa.
does your son still do regular treatments? You know, it's funny. So he's in college, and so I live in Santa Barbara, California. He's up in Humboldt, and so it's a considerable distance. But when he comes down, um, uh, you know, it now it's very lighthearted, and it's very sweet. He'll say, "Hey, your test monkey's home. Do you want me to do you want to do a stimulation on me?" And I'll say, "Okay." But I think what's, all levity aside, he recognizes how he feels when he gets it, and um, he tells me what he wants now, and so he's done so much of it that he's capable of being able to read the EEG and do the things that I do, just through the process of doing it throughout the majority of his life. But really, I think the intensive treatment stopped for him when he turned, I want to say around 10 or 11. And he didn't, he didn't need it anymore, which is really good. Was there another question?
Yeah, so we have a question here from
We'll see the
Dr.
chat
Laura
here.
Cruz. Given the
Given the
cost, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, given the cost of these treatments and not often covered by insurance, and a financially disadvantaged client, is there particular conditions that this treatment is far superior to traditional treatments? Um, hmm. I would say, when you think about the cost of this treatment, um, when we rehabilitate the brain and we establish a treatment effect, it may be costly to do it at the time of the treatment, but over the life of the person, it's cheap, because they don't have to continue to go to doctor's appointments. They don't have to continue to take medications, and usually they don't need psychotherapy. And so, what we've seen is that, it's a very cost-effective way of approaching different kinds of issues. Now, like I said before, for substance abuse issues, in my opinion, it is superior to the alternatives. It really does help to cut cravings. It helps to stabilize depression and anxiety. We've been able to show that beyond a shadow of a doubt. So without saying more about that, I would say that it's superior to some of the other treatments. It's better when you combine them together, though. I hate to say, like, well, this is better than medication. We actually use it in conjunction with medication, and then we start to titrate the medications off when the person starts to get better. So, they can all be used together. However, it's very good for the treatment of head injury. It's very good for the treatment of depression. It's very good for the treatment of anxiety. And so, unfortunately, it is not covered by insurance. However, we're working on that. And so, we're trying to establish, payment through insurance, because the insurance company will inevitably make more money if they have to pay less over the life of the person. I see Kurt's question. On top of Laura's question, for the MDs that are interacting with insurance providers or writing medical legal reports, recommendations, do you find that there is increasing receptivity of insurance providers to cover these modalities, given the ability to provide pre and post quantitative data? The answer is yes, Kurt. So what we've done in Florida is we presented Blue Cross with that information. At first, they weren't too receptive of it because they owed us money. But when we were able to show them that the recidivism rate was so low, and then in isolate it, because they had this really wide population of people they were looking at, and so these victories were covered up by a lot of people that went to different facilities. But when you actually group them and sort them and looked at them over time, they weren't paying hardly anything for them. They were stable. And so what they did was they created a $2 million contract with the facility and said, yeah, we want you to treat them and we'll pay for it. Not only is insurance doing it, but the first responders have their own organizations and associations here in the United States that have their own private insurance. And we've been able to demonstrate to them that we can rehabilitate first responders with PTSD. And so as a result of that, they send people from all over the country to the Florida facility to get treatment because it is effective and costs them less. So, we're making headway with this. It's having to change kind of some of the paradigm in the way that we're approaching some of these things. But you know, I at first we were, the physicians at the facility, didn't have anything like this. And when they saw me come walking in, they said, well, number one, is it safe? Number two, if we give medications to this sensitive brain, how do we know it's safe? And we ran a number of trials and we were able to show that. And then what the doctors really found, much to their delight, was that the dosing actually was lower. They didn't have to give as much medication to the people because when you stimulate the brain, you get an infusion of blood flow, which means whatever's on board in the body gets deeper into the brain. And so they started to see these people have responses to antidepressants at a much lower dose. So all of a sudden, liability went down and cost went down. So, now we look at it and they'll come to me and say, yeah, I'm gonna, we're not going to give comfort meds to this person, and we're not going to give anything that, like a benzo or anything like that, because you can go in and give a stimulation and cut their craving, and we'll get them through another day until they get stable. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to that, but they're starting to get happy about it. Let's see, most insurance will cover clinical counseling, at least here in Canada. Would these treatments not be covered under that umbrella? Might be a more of a question for Jennifer.
It depends. It's pretty specific to the program. ICBC covers what we do, and they tend to really love it because it's so data driven, and what their reports are given are objective metrics. And so ICBC really loves it. The VA has approved it. TELUS's health insurance has covered it. A lot of the EFAPs in town cover it. I don't know about Canada Life. But yeah, those are questions like I'm happy to look into those for folks. It is also, there are times where like my favorite way to do EMDR is with Dr. Dogris's system. If you have a nervous system that is really dysregulated and really just doesn't tolerate any kind of therapy, or just doesn't feel safe. Safety is like not a thing that they know. I find that oftentimes the only way that I can help them is to do EMDR with the stem. And so often, or someone with a head injury who can't do the bilateral eye movements, that we do the stimulation on the mastoids. But at the same time, we use the photobiomodulation and the pulsed electromagnetic field. And the clients are just so calm. They're able to maintain presence while their mind is digesting really difficult memories, because they're able to stay calm through the session and not dissociate or not dysregulated. And so when I'm using STEM at the same time as a therapy, I've not had a problem getting that covered by insurance companies at all.
Yeah, there's actually a CPT code in the United States for psychotherapy and stimulation at the same time. And so, and we've seen the same thing. And years ago, we learned that, actually, when I learned EMDR, it was in 1994, and it was Francine Shapiro who taught us. And she was asked at that time where trauma was stored in the brain, and she said, I think it's in the glia, and then flash forward to 20 years to 2015, and I'm reading this study about how STIM makes the glia surge. And then I'm thinking, and then we started seeing people get stimulation that had PTSD, and they would experience abreactions, right? And so we were able to screen them and say, wow, this person has a history of PTSD. You've got to be real careful with them. And that's when we developed that stimulation assisted EMDR protocol, which I love. I think it works very well, and I think it's actually smoother than regular EMDR because, when you're doing eye movement with a person, the eyes stick, when they're doing the movement, and with the when you're actually simulating the eye movement with the mastoids, it's very fluid, and I think it moves them through the process faster. So
Yeah,
it
I
really
would
is.
agree.
I think,
I say it's a very humane way
yeah,
to get your
yeah.
proper reprocessing.
Hmm. And my
Um,
wife is a depth psychotherapist, and she uses stimulation all the time during psychotherapy, and finds it to be very helpful to the process.
yeah. And one thing that might be helpful for people here in Canada to know as well is that the QEEG data is admissible in the court. It has been used in BC and Canadian law before, and we have confirmed with lawyers that that data is admissible. So when you have someone with a head injury case, or you have someone who's working with ICBC or WCB, they typically don't like to pay for that information. But it can be really supportive for the client.
Yeah, yeah. Especially now with the classifiers that we have. We designed a system that again matches you to people with TBI, and then it pulls 49 different metrics out of that data, and it puts them in a database, and it weights the data, and then it gives it to ChatGPT 5, and it says, "You're a neurologist, write up a report for this," right? And using only this data, you have to really make sure that you limit what these GPTs can do, because they'll go outside of the confines or limitations that you place on them, and find information somewhere else. And so we limited it significantly, and the way that it actually pulls network data is astonishing. It can see things that you typically can't glean from a regular analysis. But then it can tell you the strong classification or not for this person. So if a person has a TBI, it can tell you within a certain level of assuredness whether or not it actually thinks so. Um, let's see, there's one person that actually I evaluated a couple days ago, and this person suffered from a TBI, and I'm going to show you uh, I want to show you the classifier. Can I do that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so check this out. So this is pretty cool. So this is what so pulling from their data set, if the score is above 50, it's considered uh, significant. And so then the system itself wrote this portion. And so now it says, well, this is a match to developmental disorders profile. And then it kind of goes through what the interpretation is. We make sure to say, we're not diagnosing this. It's simply a matching system. All right. It's meant to put data in front of you for your consideration. But when it starts to look at the main deviations and the features, you start to find that it's looking at, like, default mode network responses, salience network, executive functioning, dorsal and attention network. And it's able to do it very, very quickly and put this together. And it tells you what the key features are. And then it's going to tell you what some of the what the implication for different conditions are, which is pretty neat. And now when you have this information, then you can go back and you can say, well, this network's having an issue, and then you can target that area and start to rehabilitate it.
Mhm.
So this is the whole purpose of the system, to put it in front of you. It does mood scores, and then there was one more here. This is the TBI classifier, and this is a strong classification for TBI with this person. And again, it goes through all the actual metrics, and which ones were significant. And look at this list. It's huge. Now, for when all of these metrics are based on the research. Okay. And so when you have a significant finding with this information, you have a pretty strong case. I do a lot of forensic work. And so, when I get asked to evaluate people that have suffered from injuries, like personal injury, this is information that I give counsel and say, well, this is based on the data. Now it's up to you to decide what you want to do. They're a strong match, which really takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. But it is a hyper, quantification of the data.
Yeah, thank you for showing us that. That's
Mhm.
wonderful. Thank you so much for spending an hour with us. And it's when we do new innovative treatments, they're sometimes hard to understand. They're sometimes
Mhm.
hard to glean, like, are they evidence-based? Are they safe? Do they work in the long term? And so I'm incredibly grateful for you just to take the time today and help share that
Oh,
information.
you're welcome. Yeah, yeah. We endeavor to be very evidence-based. That's what it's all about. And to make it incredibly helpful for people, make it, the real thing. And, it's not a one size fits all. It's not the panacea. It's not going to do everything for everyone. But it does move the needle and it is effective. And so because of that, it's worth the time. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. It was wonderful to see you, and as always, to continue to learn from you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.